Chapter 1. The Silent Call. Earth's Edge of Nowhere Frontier Station, year 2173. The mining ship Stellar Resolve drifted in orbit around HD 302, a nameless, barren world forgotten by both maps and civilization. This place wasn't on any trader's route or explorer's logs, an uninhabitable wasteland scarred by 1,000 abandoned industrial sites. For Eli Grant, a lone salvager, that made it perfect. Eli leaned back in the pilot's seat, tapping the dashboard with a rhythm born of boredom. The ship's sensors hummed softly, scanning for anything worth hauling back. Resources were scarce in the galaxy's farthest reaches, and scavenging the remnants of humanity's forgotten ambitions was the best way to make a living out here. The scanner beeped faintly, breaking his rhythm. Eli sat upright and squinted at the monitor. "Something's active down there," he muttered to himself. A faint energy signature pulsed on the screen, buried beneath miles of rubble and metallic debris. He furrowed his brow. The world below was supposed to be lifeless, no signals, no power, nothing. Great, he sighed. Another ghost signal. Still, curiosity tugged at him. He adjusted his course, the Resolve tilting as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Clouds of ash swirled outside the cockpit, illuminated by the ship's landing lights. When the craft finally touched down, the ground beneath it groaned, a thin crust of cracked concrete and twisted metal. Eli grabbed his gear, a battered exploration suit, an oxygen tank, and a handheld scanner. He double-checked his weapon holstered at his side, a precaution, not a necessity. Out here, anything could happen. The black box. The signal led him to the remnants of a sprawling industrial complex, its towers leaning precariously like the ribs of a decaying beast. The air was thick with dust and the faint stench of oxidized metal. His boots crunched against the debris as he moved toward the source of the signal, his scanner's chirps growing louder with each step. Then, he saw it. Half buried in the rubble was a black cube, its surface smooth and unblemished despite its surroundings. It was roughly the size of a small room, its edges faintly glowing with a soft blue hue. Eli frowned, kneeling to inspect it. The cube pulsed gently, emitting a low hum that resonated in his chest. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. The scanner identified it as extraterrestrial technology, but the readings were inconsistent, anomalous. Eli hesitated. Alien tech was valuable, but it was also unpredictable. Still, something about the cube drew him closer. As he brushed his gloved hand against its surface, a sharp, melodic sound rang out. He froze, his heart pounding. The sound wasn't mechanical, it was a voice. "Help me." Eli blinked, staring at the cube. The voice had been faint, barely audible, but unmistakably alive. "Is someone in there?" he asked aloud, his voice echoing in the desolate landscape. The cube didn't respond. Eli examined its surface, searching for a way to open it. His fingers found a faint seam running along one edge, and he pulled out a multi-tool, carefully prying it apart. With a hiss, the cube split open, releasing a rush of cold air. Inside, bathed in pale blue light, was a figure. The woman inside. She was humanoid but distinctly alien. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent silver hue, faintly glowing veins tracing intricate patterns beneath the surface. Her hair, if it could be called that, floated weightlessly, as though suspended in water, and her closed eyes were framed by long, elegant lashes. She was encased in a translucent pod, her body unmoving. Eli stared, his breath caught in his throat. He'd heard rumors of alien stasis pods used for long-term survival, but he'd never seen one not like this. The voice came again, weaker this time. "Please, help." The pod's occupant stirred, her eyes fluttering open. They were large and luminescent, a deep violet that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. She looked at him, her gaze filled with both confusion and relief. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice soft but trembling. "I could ask you the same thing," Eli replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "Are you trapped in there?" The woman's gaze flickered to her surroundings, her expression tightening. "Yes. This stasis unit was damaged. I can no longer control it." Eli hesitated, then nodded. "All right. Hold on. Let me see what I can do." Freeing her. The pod's interface was complex, its alien symbols indecipherable to him. Eli muttered curses under his breath, as he fumbled with the controls. The woman watched him, her expression a mixture of hope and wariness. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to fill the tense silence. "Naira, of the Alithian Ascendancy," she said, her voice growing stronger. "And you?" "Eli. Just a guy trying to make a living." Naira's lips curved faintly, though her expression remained strained. "Then you've found quite the haul, haven't you?" Eli chuckled nervously. "Yeah, I guess you could say that." After several agonizing minutes, he managed to override the pod's locking mechanism. The translucent cover hissed open, and Naira stepped out, her movements slow and unsteady. She stumbled, and Eli caught her, surprised by how light she felt. "Easy," he said, steadying her. "You've probably been in there a while." Naira nodded, her gaze sweeping over their surroundings. "This place, is it still active?" "Active?" Eli repeated, confused. She shook her head, a flicker of fear crossing her face. "Never mind. We must leave. Now." Eli frowned. "Why? What's the rush?" Naira's gaze locked onto his, her violet eyes intense. "Because if I'm awake, it means they've found me." A sudden attack. Before Eli could ask what she meant, a sharp sound split the air, a high-pitched whine, followed by the unmistakable roar of engines. He turned, his stomach sinking as he saw a sleek, black ship descending toward them, its design angular and menacing. "Friends of yours?" Eli asked, his voice tight. Naira's expression hardened. "No, they're hunters. They want what's in my head." "What's in your head?" Eli asked, already drawing his weapon. Naira didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed his arm. "We have to run." The two of them bolted, the black ship landing with a deafening thud behind them. Eli could hear the sound of heavy boots hitting the ground, followed by guttural voices barking commands in an alien language. "Keep moving," Naira urged, her grip surprisingly strong for someone who had just emerged from stasis. They ducked behind a crumbling wall as plasma bolts streaked past them, scorching the air. Eli fired a few shots blindly over the edge, but the pursuing soldiers were relentless, their armor deflecting most of his attacks. "This isn't going to work," he shouted. "We need a plan." Naira's eyes scanned their surroundings, her mind working quickly. Finally, she pointed to a narrow tunnel partially buried under debris. "There. It leads to the old transit system." Eli didn't argue. They scrambled through the rubble, plasma fire following them. As they entered the tunnel, Naira placed her hand on a small panel, and the door slammed shut behind them with a hiss. For a moment, all was silent except for their labored breathing. A fragile alliance. Eli leaned against the tunnel wall, his chest heaving. "Okay," he said, pointing at her. "You've got some explaining to do." Naira met his gaze, her expression grim. "I will explain, but first you must understand. If we don't keep moving, they will find us. And if they do, we're both dead." Eli nodded reluctantly. "Fair enough. But you owe me answers." Naira's lips quirked into a faint smile. "Agreed." As they made their way deeper into the tunnels, the echoes of their footsteps fading into the darkness, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just been irrevocably changed. Chapter 2. The Chase. The air inside the tunnels was damp and heavy, thick with the smell of rust and decay. Eli glanced over his shoulder as the faint echo of footsteps faded into the distance. He wasn't sure if the hunters had given up or were regrouping, but the brief lull in their pursuit gave him a chance to breathe. Naira led the way, her movements fluid despite the confines of the narrow passage. She seemed eerily calm, her violet eyes scanning the shadows ahead. To Eli, she looked otherworldly, her glowing veins faintly illuminating the dark tunnel walls like constellations. "All right," Eli said, breaking the silence. "We're not being shot at for the moment, so start talking. Who are those guys, and why are they trying to kill us?" Naira didn't break stride. "They're not trying to kill us. They want me alive. You, however, are expendable." Eli scoffed. "Great. That's comforting." Naira stopped abruptly, turning to face him. Her gaze was intense, her voice low. "Eli, they are bounty hunters working for the Zilveran Syndicate, a powerful faction that deals in technology and biological assets." "Biological assets?" Eli repeated, his stomach sinking. You mean people? Yes, Naira said. And I'm worth more to them than most. The information in my mind could destabilize entire systems. They will stop at nothing to retrieve it. Eli frowned. What kind of information are we talking about? Naira hesitated, her expression unreadable. Do you know what the Alithian ascendancy is? Eli shook his head. Can't say I've heard of it. Her lips pressed into a thin line. We were once the most advanced civilization in this sector. Our technology, our culture, our understanding of the universe was unrivaled. But that knowledge made us a target. The Syndicate raided our worlds, enslaved our people, and destroyed what they couldn't take. Eli's eyes widened. And you? Naira looked away. I was a researcher. I worked on projects designed to preserve our knowledge, to protect what little we had left. That cube you found me in it wasn't just a stasis pod. It was a vault. Everything my people knew, everything we were, is stored in my mind. Eli ran a hand through his hair, trying to process what she was saying. So you're, what, the last of your kind? No, Naira said quietly, but I might be the only one who can fight back. A deadly encounter. The sound of distant footsteps interrupted their conversation. Naira's head snapped toward the noise, her expression hardening. They found us. Eli drew his pistol, his pulse quickening. How many? Naira closed her eyes for a moment, her glowing veins pulsing faintly. 4. Heavily armed. Eli's brow furrowed. How do you dash? There's no time, she said, cutting him off. We need to keep moving. They hurried deeper into the tunnels, their footsteps echoing against the damp walls. The hunters' voices grew louder, their guttural language sending chills down Eli's spine. He could hear the faint hum of their weapons charging, the telltale sign of plasma rifles primed to fire. Here, Naira said, pulling him into a side passage. She placed her hand against the wall, and a hidden panel slid open, revealing a small maintenance shaft. This way. Eli climbed in after her, the shaft barely wide enough to accommodate them. The panel slid shut just as the hunters entered the main tunnel. Through the thin walls, Eli could hear their voices, sharp and guttural. He held his breath, his hand hovering over his pistol. They'll find this passage eventually, Naira whispered. We need to create a diversion. Eli raised an eyebrow. Got any brilliant ideas? Naira smirked faintly, then reached into a small pouch at her waist. She pulled out a small, spherical device and handed it to him. Throw this when I say. What is it? Eli asked, examining the sphere. A surprise, Naira replied, her tone cryptic. The escape. As they moved further through the shaft, Naira's confidence seemed to grow. She navigated the maze of tunnels with ease, her every movement deliberate and precise. Eli, on the other hand, struggled to keep up, his nerves fraying with each step. Finally, they reached a larger chamber-forgotten control room, its consoles covered in dust and grime. Naira approached one of the panels, her fingers gliding over the alien symbols etched into its surface. What are you doing? Eli asked, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Activating the old defense systems, Naira said. This facility was abandoned, but not all of its systems were decommissioned. As she worked, the hunter's footsteps grew louder, echoing through the tunnels. Eli tightened his grip on the sphere she had given him, his heart pounding. Now, Naira said suddenly. Eli didn't hesitate. He hurled the sphere into the adjacent tunnel, and it exploded in a burst of blinding light and deafening sound. The hunters shouted in confusion, their footsteps faltering. Move! Naira shouted, grabbing his arm. They sprinted through the control room and into another tunnel, the echoes of the explosion still ringing in Eli's ears. Behind them, the defense systems Naira had activated roared to life. Automated turrets emerged from the walls, firing streams of plasma at the hunters. The air filled with the sharp tang of ozone and the distant cries of their pursuers. A moment of respite. When they finally emerged into the open air, Eli collapsed against a boulder, his chest heaving. The sky above was a dull gray, the planet's twin moons casting faint shadows over the desolate landscape. Naira stood nearby, scanning the horizon with a focused intensity. Her hair floated gently around her head, catching the moonlight like strands of silver. We're not safe yet, she said, her voice steady. "The syndicate won't stop until I'm captured or dead." Eli looked up at her, his expression incredulous. "Why me? Why drag me into this? I could have just left you in that box." Naira's gaze softened. "You could have, but you didn't. That tells me you're different, that you're someone I can trust." Eli sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Well, trust or not, I don't know how much longer we can keep this up. If they've got ships in orbit, Dash." "They won't," Naira interrupted. "Not after what I did." Eli frowned. "What did you do?" She hesitated, then said, "I sabotaged their tracking systems before I escaped. They can't call for reinforcements. For now, it's just us and them." Eli stared at her, a mixture of admiration and frustration in his eyes. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" Naira smiled faintly. "You have no idea." A new resolve. As the two of them set off across the barren landscape, Eli felt a strange sense of purpose. He didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was clear. Naira was counting on him, and he wasn't about to let her down. Far above, a sleek syndicate ship hovered silently, its crimson lights flickering ominously. The hunters had failed, but their commander watched the scene below with cold determination. "This isn't over," he muttered, his voice low and venomous. "Not by a long shot." Chapter 3. The Reckoning. The desolate expanse of the abandoned planet stretched endlessly before them. The cracked, barren surface was a graveyard of forgotten machinery and toppled towers, the remnants of a civilization long lost. Eli adjusted his grip on the salvaged plasma rifle slung across his back, stealing glances at Naira as they navigated the wasteland. Despite her graceful stride, he could see the strain in her movements. Whatever had sustained her during her time in the black box, it hadn't fully restored her strength. Still, her resolve was unshaken, and Eli found himself marveling at her tenacity. "Where are we heading?" he asked, breaking the silence. Naira pointed toward the horizon, where the jagged outline of a mountain range loomed. "There's an ancient Elythian outpost buried beneath those peaks. If we can reach it, I might be able to access what's left of our defense systems. It's the only way we'll have a chance against the syndicate." Eli frowned. "How do you know it's still there? This place looks like it's been abandoned for centuries." Naira's glowing violet eyes met his. "Because I helped build it." "The syndicate closes in." High above, the syndicate commander paced the bridge of his sleek warship, his crimson eyes locked on a holographic display of the planet below. His soldiers had failed to capture Naira in the tunnels, and their setback had cost them valuable time. "Status report," he growled, his voice a low rumble that sent shivers through the crew. "Tracking systems have been partially restored," one of his officers replied. "We've pinpointed their approximate location. They're heading toward the mountains." The commander's lip curled into a sneer. "Send a strike team to intercept them, and deploy the drones. I want no mistakes this time." Into the mountains. Eli and Naira reached the base of the mountains just as night began to fall. The twin moons cast an eerie light over the jagged peaks, their shadows stretching long across the barren ground. "This way," Naira said, leading him toward a narrow crevasse hidden between two massive boulders. The entrance was almost invisible, concealed by layers of rock and debris. As they slipped inside, Eli felt the air grow colder. The passageway was dark and claustrophobic, the walls slick with moisture. He switched on the flashlight mounted on his rifle, the beam cutting through the gloom. "Are you sure this is safe?" he asked. Naira's voice was steady. "Safer than staying out there." They moved deeper into the mountain, the narrow passage eventually opening into a vast underground chamber. Eli's flashlight illuminated rows of alien consoles and towering machines, their surfaces covered in dust but still intact. The air here felt different, charged with a faint hum of energy. "This is it," Naira said, her voice tinged with both relief and sorrow. "The last stronghold of the Elythian ascendancy." Eli took in the scene, his eyes wide. "It's incredible." Naira moved to one of the consoles, brushing away the dust with a careful hand. She activated it, and the room lit up as holographic displays flickered to life. Streams of alien text scrolled across the screens, and the hum of power grew louder. "I need time to reactivate the defense systems," she said. "Can you watch the entrance?" Eli nodded. "Yeah, I've got it. Just hurry." The first attack. Eli barely had time to set up his position at the entrance when the sound of thrusters echoed through the cavern. A squad of Syndicate drones descended from above, their sleek forms bristling with weapons. "Naira, we've got company," he shouted, raising his rifle. The drones opened fire, plasma bolts streaking through the air. Eli ducked behind a pillar, returning fire in short, controlled bursts. His shots managed to take down 2 of the drones, but more kept coming, their glowing red optics tracking his every move. Behind him, Naira worked furiously at the console, her fingers flying over the alien interface. "Just hold them off a little longer." Eli gritted his teeth as a plasma bolt grazed his shoulder, the heat searing through his jacket. "No pressure, right?" One of the drones swooped low, its weapons charging for a final strike. Before it could fire, a burst of energy erupted from behind Eli, tearing the drone apart. He turned to see Naira holding a small, glowing device, its surface crackling with residual power. "You could have told me you had that," Eli said, his voice breathless. Naira smirked faintly. "I needed the element of surprise." The Syndicate arrives. The momentary victory was short-lived. A low rumble shook the cavern, and Eli turned to see a Syndicate strike team entering the chamber. Their armor gleamed under the harsh light, and their weapons glowed with ominous energy. Naira stepped forward, her posture commanding. "I'll handle them. Keep working on the defenses." Eli hesitated. "Are you sure?" Naira nodded. "I'm not the same fragile being you found in that box." With that, she surged forward, her movements a blur. Her glowing veins pulsed with energy as she engaged the Syndicate soldiers, her attacks a deadly combination of speed and precision. Eli watched in awe as she dismantled their formation, her strikes leaving trails of violet light in the air. But even Naira couldn't hold them off forever. The Syndicate commander entered the chamber, his presence imposing. He raised a massive weapon, aiming directly at her. "Naira, look out!" Eli shouted. She turned just in time, narrowly dodging the blast. The impact sent a shockwave through the cavern, toppling one of the ancient machines. Eli fired at the commander, but his shots barely dented the Syndicate's armor. The commander sneered, his crimson eyes locking onto him. "You're outmatched, human." "Maybe," Eli said, his voice steady, "but I'm not alone." The Reckoning. Naira activated the last of the defense systems, and the chamber roared to life. Automated turrets emerged from the walls, firing streams of plasma at the Syndicate forces. The remaining drones and soldiers were quickly overwhelmed, their retreat cut off by the cavern's automated doors. The commander growled in frustration, raising his weapon for one final attack. Naira stepped forward, her glowing veins blazing with energy. She raised her hand, and a surge of violet light erupted from her palm, slamming into the commander and sending him crashing into the wall. He struggled to rise, his armor cracked and sparking. "This isn't over," he hissed before activating a teleportation device and vanishing. Eli slumped against the nearest console, his chest heaving. "Is it over?" Naira nodded, though her expression remained guarded. "For now, but the Syndicate will return. They always do." A shared purpose. As they emerged from the mountain, the dawn light painted the barren landscape in shades of gold and crimson. Eli glanced at Naira, who seemed both stronger and more vulnerable than ever. "So what now?" he asked. Naira met his gaze, her violet eyes filled with determination. "Now, we rebuild. The Syndicate may have taken my people, but they haven't taken our legacy. And with your help, I might just have a chance to stop them." Eli smiled faintly. "Well, I've got nothing better to do." As they set off into the wasteland, the promise of a new alliance hung between them. The Syndicate would come again, but together, they would be ready. Chapter 4. The Legacy. The dawn sky over the desolate planet was quiet, but the silence felt deceptive. Eli and Naira walked through the barren landscape toward a hidden structure that had just revealed itself in the mountain's shadows, an Elythian legacy vault, buried for centuries but now pulsating faintly with power. Its sleek, alien architecture glowed with veins of light, echoing the patterns that coursed through Naira's skin. Eli gripped his salvaged plasma rifle tightly, scanning the horizon for any signs of Syndicate forces. After their narrow escape in the mountain chamber, He was certain the syndicate wasn't done with them, and neither was their commander. "What exactly are we walking into?" he asked, his voice low. Naira's gaze remained fixed ahead. "The Legacy Vault is more than a repository of knowledge. It houses the last remnants of my people's advanced defense systems. If we can activate it, we may have a chance to hold the syndicate at bay." Eli frowned. "And if it's not functional?" Naira's lips tightened. "Then we improvise." The unease in her voice was enough to keep Eli on edge. As they approached the entrance, the ground beneath them trembled, and the massive doors of the vault slid open with a low hiss, revealing a corridor bathed in soft violet light. "This is it," Naira said, stepping forward. The vault's secrets. Inside, the Legacy Vault was a marvel of alien engineering. Towering columns of crystalline data cores lined the walls, each one pulsating faintly with energy. Holographic projections floated in the air, displaying complex schematics and unreadable Elithian text. The air hummed with an almost tangible energy, and Eli felt a chill run down his spine. "This place is incredible," he murmured. Naira moved with purpose, her fingers brushing against one of the crystalline cores. "This is the heart of our civilization. Everything we were, everything we knew, is stored here." As she spoke, a holographic interface flared to life in front of her. Streams of data cascaded across the display, and Naira's expression hardened as she navigated the system. "What are you doing?" Eli asked. "Restoring the automated defenses," she replied. "The vault was designed to protect itself in the event of an attack, but it's been dormant for centuries. I need to reactivate its systems before the syndicate arrives." Eli's eyes widened. "How long do we have?" Naira hesitated, then said, "Not long. They'll be here soon." The syndicate's final assault. Outside the vault, the calm of the morning was shattered by the distant roar of engines. Eli peered through the narrow opening of the entrance and saw a syndicate warship descending toward them, its sleek, angular design casting a long shadow over the landscape. "They're here," he called back. Naira's fingers flew over the holographic controls. "I need more time. Hold them off as long as you can." Eli cursed under his breath, gripping his rifle tightly as he stepped outside. The syndicate forces were already deploying, a squad of heavily armored soldiers marching toward the vault. Drones buzzed overhead, their red optics scanning the area. "Here we go," Eli muttered, taking cover behind a jagged boulder. The first wave of soldiers opened fire, plasma bolts streaking through the air. Eli returned fire, his shots finding their mark and taking down 2 of the soldiers. But more kept coming, their ranks seemingly endless. "Naira, any time now would be great," he shouted. Naira's awakening. Inside the vault, Naira's glowing veins pulsed brighter as she connected with the vault's systems. Her eyes fluttered shut, and her consciousness expanded, merging with the ancient technology. She could feel the energy of the vault coursing through her, a vast reservoir of knowledge and power that responded to her commands. "Defenses online," she whispered. Outside, the ground trembled as the vault's automated systems came to life. Turrets emerged from hidden compartments in the ground, firing streams of plasma at the syndicate forces. Drones descended from the sky, their sleek forms targeting the enemy with pinpoint accuracy. Eli ducked as a turret fired past him, obliterating a group of syndicate soldiers. "Now that's more like it," he yelled, grinning despite himself. The syndicate forces faltered under the onslaught, but the warship overhead began deploying heavier artillery. A massive walker mech descended from the ship, its legs thundering against the ground as it advanced toward the vault. Eli's grin faded. "Naira, we've got a problem." The commander returns. The warship's ramp lowered, and the syndicate commander emerged, his crimson eyes blazing with fury. He surveyed the battlefield, his lips curling into a sneer. "Activate the disruptor," he barked to his subordinates. From the ship, a massive device was deployed, emitting a low-frequency pulse that disrupted the vault's defenses. The turrets faltered, their plasma streams sputtering, and the drones fell from the sky. Inside the vault, Naira gasped as the connection between her and the system was severed. She stumbled, her glowing veins dimming. "Naira!" Eli shouted, running back into the vault. She steadied herself, her expression grim. "The syndicate's disruptor is jamming the defenses." I need to take it down. Eli nodded. Tell me what to do. Naira met his gaze, her violet eyes filled with determination. Cover me. The final stand. Naira and Eli emerged from the vault, moving together toward the disruptor. The syndicate forces closed in, but Eli held them at bay, firing in controlled bursts. Naira moved with precision, her glowing veins flaring brighter as she drew on her remaining strength. As they approached the disruptor, the syndicate commander stepped forward, his massive weapon aimed directly at Naira. You've lost a Lithian, he sneered. Surrender now, and I might let your human pet live. Naira's eyes narrowed. You underestimate us. With a burst of speed, she lunged at the disruptor, her hand glowing with violet energy. She placed her palm against the device, and a surge of power erupted from her, overloading the disruptor and sending a shockwave across the battlefield. The syndicate forces were thrown into disarray as the vault's defenses reactivated. Turrets and drones resumed their assault, cutting through the remaining soldiers with relentless precision. The commander staggered to his feet, his armor cracked and sparking. He raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Eli's shot struck him square in the chest. The commander collapsed, his lifeless form crumpling to the ground. A new beginning. The battlefield fell silent as the last of the syndicate forces retreated. The warship lifted off, disappearing into the sky, and the vault's defenses powered down, their job complete. Eli and Naira stood together, their breaths heavy but victorious. The legacy vault hummed faintly behind them, its ancient power a reminder of what they had fought to protect. What now? Eli asked, his voice quiet. Naira looked at him, her violet eyes softening. Now, we rebuild. The syndicate will return, but we'll be ready. Eli smiled faintly. We make a good team, you know? Naira's lips curved into a rare smile. Yes, we do. As the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, they turned back toward the vault, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.